Assalamu alaikum and welcome back from the break. We are still joined on the sofa with Rizwhan Sulaiman. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum. So before the break we were discussing about the Islamic health philosophy. So I mean, what are the common misconceptions with the Islamic health philosophy?
Okay, so in general, when it comes to health philosophy, the majority of us, especially health professionals who are learning and leading the way, I guess, in our communities in terms of our health and the health of the community, we're taught from a secular basis to begin with. So we're taught from the concept that our bodies are just our bodies, effectively, and that we don't have a soul, for example. So I know this sounds really weird, and we all know and understand, especially as Muslims, that we all have a soul. But the importance of this principle in our underpinning our health is very important. So this is one of the general misconceptions, because when we take that idea away, the fact that you don't have the fact that you have a soul, when we take that away, what that leaves is just the skeleton of our body, like just the framework, basically. So in medicine, people often follow what's classed as the mechanical model, effectively, or the biomechanical model, meaning that the biomedical model, rather, where you are just a machine almost. And then if the machine doesn't work, you change the parts and you fix it and so forth. And this leads us to a very reductionist type of approach. So this is kind of the thing where everything works on its own, and it's not kind of integrated as part of a bigger thing, and it's not a holistic view. So it's not you are integrated with your soul and your feelings and the things around you. And what we call and what we teach in our institute is the biopsychosocial spiritual model, where when we're looking at the health of a person, we have to evaluate and understand all of these things and how they intertwine together. So it's basically taking a holistic view as opposed to a reductionist view. So that's one of the big misconceptions, and I think is a fundamental flaw, especially when we look at things like psychiatry. You know, when people are studying psychiatry and they're applying it, for example, they're often trying to isolate and look at, okay, which chemical is it that's low in your brain, and which one do we need to supplement, and which drug do you need to take? And this approach sometimes really limits our capabilities in terms of helping patients and achieving better health.
So what kind of approach would you take? For example, the difference obviously in Western medicine, you were saying about psychosis, mental health, they would just give you drugs and prescriptions. What kind of approach would you take for an issue like that?
Well, your question kind of touches upon one of the other foundational flaws in our health philosophy as Muslims, and that is that, number one, is that conventional medicine has the cure for everything, and it is the answer to everything. Now, from the perspective of the Sunnah, there's a lot more than just drugs and surgery. We know from the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ and the many kind of remedies he's given and the many statements he's made in relation to different things which have shifa and benefit in them, that drugs and surgery were not the end-all and be-all of the Islamic health model. And on top of that as well, in terms of our understanding and belief as well, when we're limited to just drugs and surgery, we're often told this misconception, and what I would believe as a Muslim is an outright lie that every single disease is curable according to Islam. Okay, so according to what we believe, for every disease there's a cure. Whereas in conventional medicine, and many of my patients come to me when they're really at the end of the tether because they've been told by every specialist that they've been to that, I'm sorry, there's no cure for your disease and there's no cure for your problem. And you have to live with, for example, pain, or you have to live with endless medications, and there's no cure, we just have to manage it.
So I mean, what would you say to the critics then, that doctors that would say, well, there is no cure for cancer, for example? Where do you stand on that? What would your response
have you
be?
experienced anything where someone has come to you, like you said, at the end of their tether, and you've maybe suggested a form of treatment and they've gotten better?
There's many cases where we've managed chronic conditions, we've managed life-limiting conditions, we've managed so many problems in which there have been better results and there have been excellent outcomes and many cures in instances as well. But obviously these are all specific and individual cases, and they don't reflect the wider the wider approach. However, in general, you have to understand that saying that to a patient, and you mentioned, for example, cancer patients. Now, a medical doctor or someone who has that kind of conventional kind of philosophy would say, yeah, sorry, there's no cure. But you have to understand that when you say that and when you use that type of language with an individual, you've just completely killed any possibility of them having any hope and any chance of recovery. Because if you're told that there's no possibility, then you will not try anything. So you understand, when in Islam we're taught, number one, the Prophet ﷺ teaches us to go and seek treatment. And then on top of that, we're taught that every disease has its cure, which means that every disease does have a cure. It's just a matter of finding which cure for which disease. And we as individuals everyone's different. So you have to find out what works for you.
Yeah. And in terms of cures and treatments, where does hijama come into this?
Well, hijama is just one of the treatment options and one of the treatment methods. So,
and is it painful? Because I've seen photographs of people getting hijama done, and I see lots of blood, and it really freaks me out. And my friends who have done it have told me, no, Saba, it's fine, get it done, it won't hurt. But I see a lot of blood, and it doesn't look great.
I think we can put some photos here on the screen of hijama and what it looks like for anyone that maybe doesn't know what it looks like. Yeah, it does look crazy, doesn't it?
Gosh, yeah.
So I completely understand. I'm scared. I think I'm too scared to try it as well.
Why should we get hijama done?
Exactly, why?
Well, first of all, I'll start by a hadith in the Prophet also mentions and also mentioned in the Quran. There may be something that's good for you that you don't like. And there's good in it, okay? And there may be something which you don't like where there's goodness in it. So first of all, don't be put off is my first kind of answer to that. And secondly, it's generally very kind of harmless, and when it's practiced in an appropriate way, it shouldn't be painful, and it's not something which should be scary in that way.
Bar all the blood.
Yeah, bar all the blood. But going back to kind of the general concept, so hijama is one of the treatments. So your question earlier was kind of the critics and kind of people who might be skeptical. So if there's a Muslim who's critical of this, so a Muslim doctor or a Muslim practitioner, I would straight away go to the foundations and say, look, the Prophet ﷺ said that the best of your medicines is hijama, for example. And he's mentioned that there's shifa in honey. In the Quran, it's mentioned that the Quran is a shifa. And there's so many different things, from the use of dates, from the use of specific kind of plant-based medicines, black seed oil, all of these things. Now, to have that kind of almost arrogance to say that, drugs and surgery are the only approach and there's nothing else in the world that can help patients, and what the medical textbooks say is end all and be all. We have to understand that science evolves and clinical medicine itself evolves, and we find out and we discover new things all the time.
Exactly. That actually reminds me, I think it was after the 2012 Olympics, hijama cupping, or whatever the official term is, suddenly became fashionable. All of the sports stars were doing it, and I remember seeing pictures all over Instagram. Everyone was on the hijama hype. So now that like science and doctors and physiotherapists are saying there's actually benefit in it, I feel that it's become a much more widespread thing, whereas in Islamic tradition it's been something that's been encouraged for centuries now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, specifically with the Olympics, I was called to do a BBC interview, and I actually demonstrated on national news what cupping is and so forth. And I got kind of challenged by a pharmacology professor.
Yes, I actually watched that interview. It seemed quite harsh.
Yeah, so a drug professor. So especially to critics, my response, number one, is a Muslim. We have to understand that, look, your philosophy and your beliefs are contrary to what you're saying. So kind of check yourself before you wreck yourself, in a way,
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Okay. So you have to realize that you're hitting away at your foundations as a Muslim when you're making those kind of statements, because you're rejecting a sunnah. And you have to understand that these are authentic hadith. When the Prophet ﷺ ascended to the 7 heavens, it's mentioned that he was instructed by the angels to tell his ummah to practice hijama. So for me, when I graduated as a chiropractor, and when I knew about the practice of hijama, and I heard these hadith that this is the best of your medicines, for me, I took it upon myself, and I thought, if I'm going to help patients and I'm going to practice a form of medicine, why would I offer my patients anything but the best?
Of course.
And on top of that, in terms of, if we're going to critics now who are not of a Muslim belief or an Islamic belief, then we have to then automatically go to the fact that in terms of medical science and the literature and the kind of scientific research that we use to practice medicine, which is the underpinning foundations of what we do, these are all funded by pharmaceutical industries, which have pharmaceutical interests. So there's no interest at all, and there's no investment opportunity for people, for example, to research into hijama, to research into natural therapies, to research into herbs, for example, which can't be patented. So the foundation, and all practitioners and all scientists, true scientists, will know this, and only someone who really doesn't understand clinical medicine and science would have the arrogance to say that, well, you know what, there's no evidence for this. Until we research it, there's not going to be any evidence. And if we choose not to research those type of topics, then we'll never discover all of these cures that are out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really interesting, and I think I've got so many more questions that I could ask you. But sadly, we've come to the end of another show. Thank you so much for being
another
with
guest
us on
that's
the sofa
left me
today.
inspired. I feel like I'm going to go home now. I'm booking a hijama appointment.
I know, maybe we should. Let's book
bathe in
a
black
hijama
seed oil.
appointment.
Is that what you do with black seed oil? I don't know. Do you drink it?
Not necessarily.
Right, sorry. Okay, unfortunately, guys, we are out of time. We really do hope you've enjoyed this episode today. A massive thank you to Waqar Azmi and Dr. Rizwhan Suleiman, and to all of you lovely people watching at home.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram by searching @BritishMuslimTV. Make sure to hashtag Sisters Hour when you're commenting.
Sisters Hour will be back tomorrow, but until then, as always, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.